Have you ever been treated like a stranger by your own family? In today's video, you're about to hear a true Reddit drama, one that's painful, but also deeply inspiring. It's the story of a girl who spent her entire life being looked down on by her siblings because she worked in a school cafeteria. And when her father was hospitalized, they kicked her out of the family group chat without a second thought. But 6 years later, she showed up at that same hospital in her own private car, flanked by bodyguards, and the entire family was stunned when they realized she was a millionaire CEO. This wasn't just a glorious comeback, it was a journey of healing, a story of someone who rose from deep hurt, turned her pain into power, and proved to the world I don't need anyone's approval to know my own worth. Chapter 1. Mom died and Dad fell apart. I always thought I understood my dad. He was the kind of man who was strict, but loving, a bit old-fashioned, but always devoted to his family. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer, he practically fell apart the moment the doctor said, late stage. During the week she was in the hospital, Dad never left her bedside, not even for a minute. He held her hand for 16 hours a day, repeating the same line over and over, "Don't leave me. I can't live without you." Every time a nurse suggested he take a break, he refused. Eventually, they had to give him a mild sedative just to get him out of the room for a little while. When Mom passed away, none of us really knew how to go on. But I was the only daughter, so I forced myself to step up, handling the funeral arrangements, calling relatives, organizing everything. Dad, meanwhile, was like a ghost. When we came home after the service, he just stood at the front door, staring into the empty house without stepping inside. The days that followed were strange. He left all of Mom's things exactly where they were. Her coffee cup with a smudge of her red lipstick sat on the kitchen counter every morning. I saw it, and I broke down crying. One day I walked in and found him sitting on the couch, eyes locked on the TV. He was watching old home videos from our family camcorder. Mom was laughing in the video. I greeted him, but he didn't respond. It was like I wasn't even there. That night, he asked me to make Mom's chicken parmesan. He said, "If you make that dish, I can pretend she's still here." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded and went into the kitchen. While I cooked, he sat silently in the living room, eyes fixed on the screen, as Mom on tape told a bedtime story to a much younger version of me. I felt sorry for him. I thought, if this helps him cope, let him have it. But then I started to realize something was off. It began with him refusing to sleep in the master bedroom. He said, "That room still smells like her perfume. I can hear her breathing in there every night." One night I woke up to a soft murmuring. I stepped out of my room and saw him sitting in the middle of the living room, clutching Mom's pillow, whispering something I couldn't make out. I said, "Dad, you need to get some sleep." He slowly turned to look at me, eyes bloodshot, and whispered, "I just want your mother to come back." I clenched my fists, swallowing back my tears. I wanted her to come back too. But what chilled me more was the way he looked at me in that moment. It was like he wasn't seeing me, but someone else. Chapter 2. When Dad started calling me Sarah. At first I thought Dad was just slipping. That him accidentally calling me Sarah, my mom's name, was just a habit tangled up in grief and age. I mean, who hasn't called a family member by their wrong name before? I told myself that for weeks. I convinced myself it was still under control. Until that night in early April. I stepped out of the bathroom, still towel drying my hair, and he was just standing there in the pitch dark hallway. He stared at me for a few seconds, then said, "Sarah." I froze, forcing a small laugh. "It's Emma, Dad. Mom's gone, remember?" He didn't respond right away. He just kept staring a little too long. Then finally he nodded, whispering almost to himself, "You look so much like your mother." At the time, I didn't think much of it beyond sadness. But that look in his eyes, I still haven't forgotten it. It wasn't the look a father gives his daughter. It was something else, something disturbingly tangled between love and loss. After that, I started paying closer attention, and I wish I hadn't. Suddenly, my closet had these old-fashioned floral dresses exactly like the ones Mom used to wear. Beige cardigans, cream-colored blouses, things I had never bought, never worn, but now hung neatly on my shelves. I asked him, "Why are these clothes in my room?" He just smiled. "They were on sale. I thought you'd look lovely in them." I snapped, "Dad, you know this is Mom's style." He nodded, smiling that same smile that made my spine go cold, and said, "Exactly." I thought maybe I was overthinking things until my shampoo disappeared. In its place was the one Mom had used for 20 years, that familiar scent. I switched it back to mine. 2 days later, it was changed again. I tried to ignore it, pretend it wasn't happening. But one morning I woke up and found all of my belongings, my clothes, my pillow, even my stuffed bear had been moved from my room into my parents' old bedroom. I nearly lost it. I stood at the doorway shouting, "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" He broke down crying. "I need you close to me, Sarah. I mean, Emma, I'm sorry, the nightmares are getting worse." That was the last time he ever called me Emma. From that day forward, I was Sarah. Always Sarah. No matter how much I protested, screamed, cried, he'd still look at me with that same twisted, grief-stricken tenderness and say, "Sarah, don't do that. You're upsetting me." I started recording the times he called me by the wrong name. I kept track of the strange things showing up in the house, because by then I knew what he was going through wasn't just grief. It was something else. Something deeply, deeply wrong. Chapter 3. The Horrific Anniversary. I always thought I was strong enough to handle anything. Mom's death, Dad falling apart, and all the strange behavior that followed. I kept trying to explain it away to stay calm. But everything shattered that morning. The morning of what would have been my parents' 20th wedding anniversary. I woke up feeling strange. My head was heavy, my eyes burned, and my heart was pounding. Something about the room felt off. It wasn't mine. It didn't smell right. I looked around, and then I realized I was lying in my parents' old bed. On the nightstand beside me was a breakfast tray with eggs, toast, and a single red rose. The room was filled with roses. Candles were lit, and from the Bluetooth speaker came the sound of my parents' wedding song. My father stood at the foot of the bed, wearing a white dress shirt and smiling a smile I didn't know how to describe. "So loving, excited, deranged," he said, "Happy anniversary, my love. Can you believe it's been 20 years?" I shot up in bed. "What is this? What the hell is going on, Dad?" My body was trembling. The room spun around me. He chuckled softly. "You've been so tense lately. I put a little sedative in your water last night so you could sleep better. The doctor said you needed to relax." I tried to get out of bed, but my legs were weak and my head was spinning. He walked over holding something in his hand. Red lingerie. He smiled. "Remember this? You wore it on our wedding night. I kept it safe all these years." I couldn't breathe. My entire body turned cold. I screamed, "I'm Emma. I'm your daughter. Mom is gone. You need to snap out of it." His face twisted. He shouted, "Stop lying. You're my wife. You've always been my wife." And then he lunged at me. I fought back, knocking the breakfast tray to the floor. He grabbed my wrist, squeezing hard, his eyes wild. "Why are you doing this on our special day, Sarah? You're making me so sad." I screamed. "I'm your daughter. I'm Emma. You're sick. Mom is dead." He paused for a moment, then whispered, "You forgot again." "That's okay. I'll help you remember." He pulled me close to his chest. I struggled, screamed, then bit down hard on his lower lip. Blood poured into my mouth. He howled. I shoved him off, ran into the bathroom, and locked the door just in time. He pounded on it. "Sarah, I promise I'll be gentle just like our first time. Don't hide from me." "It's our anniversary, my love." I scrambled to find my phone gone. I was shaking, trapped in the bathroom with his fists slamming against the door. I screamed, "Help! Somebody help me, please!" And then I heard pounding at the front door. A familiar voice shouted, "John." "What's going on in there?" It was Mr. Lee, our neighbor. Dad stopped pounding. He called back, "It's nothing, Tom. Sarah's just having another episode." I screamed, "I'm Emma, not Sarah. He's lost his mind." A loud crash. The bathroom door burst open. Dad stood there holding a syringe. "I just want to help you remember." I froze. But at that exact moment, the front door burst open too. The pounding was louder, more urgent now. "John, I'm calling the police." Dad turned his face, contorted into a dozen different expressions I couldn't read, and minutes later, the police stormed in. They wrestled him to the ground and cuffed him. Dad looked back at me, his eyes full of tears. "Sarah, tell them you're my wife. You love me." One officer turned to me. "Miss, what's your name?" I broke down, sobbing. "Emma, I'm his daughter." Chapter 4-2, Red Lines and Stolen Memories. I thought after that night, after they took my father away, covered in blood and delusions, it would all be over, that I'd finally sleep peacefully, that the nightmare was locked behind the doors of a psychiatric facility, but I was wrong. So very wrong. 2 months later, as I tried to piece my life back together, I started feeling unusually tired. Every morning came with dry heaving, my body sluggish. My mind clouded in a constant fog. I blamed it on trauma stress, the aftermath of everything. But when the smell of morning coffee made me rush to the bathroom and vomit violently, doubt began to creep in. I didn't want to believe it, but I bought a pregnancy test anyway. Quietly. Alone. When I got home, I held my breath. As I took the test, placed it on the sink, and waited. 2 lines. I let out a bitter laugh. Then louder, hysterical, even like my brain refused to process what it saw. I'd never been with anyone. Never had a boyfriend. There was never a chance for me to be pregnant. And yet, I collapsed onto the cold bathroom floor. The test still in my hand, fingers clenched around it so tightly it nearly snapped in half. My heart pounded like a drum. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a faulty test, some cruel joke, a 1 in a million medical anomaly, but I knew exactly what was happening. Because the foggy memories from right after Mom's funeral began to resurface like ghosts in daylight. 3 days. There were 3 days after the funeral that I couldn't remember. I had convinced myself I was just grieving, just tired, just sleeping, but now I remembered the strange ache in my lower back. I remembered the dream. Someone holding my hand, whispering in my ear, calling me Sarah, comforting me, telling me it's gonna be okay. I remembered Dad saying during one random conversation, "I helped you sleep better those 3 days. You slept like an angel." The memory drilled into my skull like a cold spike. I tried to stand, my legs trembling. And that's when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. It was from the psychiatric hospital. I didn't want to answer. My heart turned to ice. But my hand picked up anyway. The voice on the other end was calm, gentle, not a hint of madness. "Hello, my love." I had a feeling. "Sarah, how are you feeling? I heard you're pregnant." "It's ours, isn't it?" I couldn't speak. I just stood there frozen, the test still in my hand. Then I heard a voice in the background, a nurse maybe realizing the unauthorized call. My father rushed his words. "Take care of yourself. You're doing so well. I'll be home soon, and we'll be a family again." I dropped the phone onto the floor. My father knew I was pregnant, and he was in a locked psychiatric facility with no access to the outside world. How did he know? Or worse, who told him? I didn't know what chilled me more, the fact that I was pregnant, or the fact that he was still pulling the strings from inside that place. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, shaken, tears warping my face into something unfamiliar, and for the first time in my life, I asked myself, am I still me? Chapter 5. Evidence in the Garage. I don't know how long I sat there in the bathroom pregnancy test, cold on the floor phone, silent and heavy. My mind spun heart pounding so hard I thought it might rip through my chest. But the thing that scared me the most wasn't the two red lines. It wasn't even the fact that he knew. It was that deep down I knew this wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't grief playing tricks on me. Something real had happened. And the proof was somewhere in this house. When Mrs. Chen, our sweet neighbor, knocked on the door with a tray of lasagna, I tried my best to act normal. She smiled, turned to leave, but then paused and looked at me again. "You look a bit pale, honey. Are you feeling okay?" I just nodded and thanked her, but before walking off, she added gently, "Back a few nights after your mother's funeral, I saw you go out to the garage around 2 or 3 in the morning. A few times, I thought you were sleepwalking, so I didn't interfere." I froze. The garage. That was the one place I always avoided. Dad used to spend hours in there before he was taken away, claiming he was fixing the car, cleaning up, or just blowing off steam. I'd never gone inside. I didn't want to. I didn't want more memories. But now, the moment she left, I stood up and walked straight to the garage. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Immaculately organized. Tools hung in perfect rows on the walls, the workbench spotless. But something about it felt wrong. Too clean. Too precise. My gut told me something was hidden here. I started searching every corner. Behind a false panel at the back of an old file cabinet, I found a tiny metallic device embedded in the wall. A mini camera. The red light still blinked. It was still recording. I followed the wire. Under a dusty tarp sat a laptop still running. I opened it. The password, Mom's birthday. Pathetically, I guessed it on the first try. Dozens of video files popped up, each labeled by date. I clicked on one and nearly threw up. There I was, unconscious, being carried by my father. My head hung back, mouth slightly open, limbs limp like a rag doll. He opened the back door of his car, carefully lowered me onto the seat, and buckled me in, like he was tucking in a sleeping lover. I fast-forwarded through more files, and what was worse, the key sections where he brought me back into the house were corrupted, glitched, gone. Every moment that mattered had been wiped. But next to the laptop was a cardboard box. Inside was my dad's journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting I knew so well had become frantic, erratic. I flipped through the pages and then I saw it. Visited Sarah at 2:10 a.m. Much better with the second dose. She was soft, still, just like on our honeymoon. My throat closed. My head roared. I snapped photos of every page with shaking hands, nearly dropping my phone. And then I heard footsteps. I spun around and there was Aunt Patricia standing in the garage doorway. She wasn't shocked, wasn't confused, just tilted her head slightly, voice calm, eerily calm. "Emma, what are you doing in here?" I quickly slid the journal behind my back. "Just looking for something." Her eyes dropped to my hands. "That's your father's journal, isn't it?" I shook my head. "No, just a notebook." She stepped closer, that faint, unsettling smile curling on her lips. "You shouldn't be in here. This was your father's private space." I clenched my teeth. "I live here. Every space is mine." She stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Your father's doing very well in recovery. The doctors say he's starting to recognize you as Emma again." I didn't respond. I turned and walked away. The journal clutched tight in my hands. My lifeline. My proof. And I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't just up against my father anymore. I was up against everyone who still believed. I was Sarah. Chapter 6. The Sarah Reborn Plan. After that encounter with Aunt Patricia in the garage, I no longer felt safe in my own house. I started locking my bedroom door, propping a chair against it at night. I carried Dad's journal and the laptop with all the videos with me everywhere. Even into the bathroom when I showered. I didn't trust anyone anymore, not even my therapist, because I later found out she was my dad's cousin and Patricia. It was obvious now she wasn't just complicit, she believed in the sick delusion my father had built. Project Sarah Reborn. That name, first seen on a folder in the garage laptop, echoed in my head like a haunting refrain I couldn't silence. One night, when the house was unusually quiet, I made a decision. I went to the basement. It was the one place I'd always avoided. Dad had forbidden me from going down there even back when Mom was alive. He called it his private workspace. I turned on a flashlight and stepped carefully down the creaky wooden stairs, each footstep like falling deeper into another world. At first, everything looked ordinary. Boxes, paint cans, broken chairs. But then, in the far corner, behind a tall wooden shelf against the wall, I spotted something off a wooden panel that didn't match the rest of the room's original layout. I pulled the shelf aside. Behind the dust and shadows was a door. And behind that door was the nightmare, a room. No windows, fluorescent lights humming above, a hospital bed in the center complete with leather straps for wrists and ankles. A small medical fridge sat in the corner humming quietly. I walked over, opened it. Inside were vials, labels typed and taped on. Emma W. saw 3 days. Post Sarah's funeral. Sample 1. Frozen semen. I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled. I stumbled backward until I hit the far wall. And there on the wall was a collage of photographs. Me at different ages, side by side with pictures of my mom when she was young, and next to them, a woman I didn't recognize at first. But then I saw it. It was my grandmother. A woman Dad had never spoken about. All the women in those photos shared the same face. Variations of the same woman. Across generations. It was like looking at the same person, reborn over and over. At the center of the wall was a large photo me in a white wedding dress. Clearly photoshopped, sloppily. But my dad's eyes in that photo were real. Bright. Beaming. Alive. Below it all, taped carefully, was a sheet of paper. In bold red ink, the perfect cycle begins. She is ready. The air felt thick. The room shrank around me, the chemical stench mixed with the raw stench of fear. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, locked it, and collapsed to the floor. Shaking. Every cell in my body wanted to scream, vomit rip the memories from my skull. But I didn't do any of that. I just sat there and cried. Not out of fear, but because I knew this had been planned. All of it. Maybe since Mom's cancer diagnosis, maybe since before I hit puberty, maybe even since the day I was born. To him, I was never me. I was just another version of Sarah. And that room was where he prepared to make me her all over again. Not out of love, but out of obsession. A deranged belief that true love never dies. Even if he had to kill my mother to free her and use me to bring her back. Chapter 7. Aunt Patricia and the Therapist's Betrayal. After leaving the basement, I was no longer a daughter merely trying to survive. I became a collector of evidence, photos, journals, videos, documents. Proof. I no longer believed this was just my father's psychological breakdown. No, this was a system, a plan. Something coordinated, protected by people who knew exactly what they were doing. And the next person I began to doubt was the therapist Mika had helped me find. Someone who seemed completely neutral. My first session with her, Dr. Martinez, seemed normal. Cozy office, warm lighting, a soft smile. She asked the usual questions: family, emotions, sleep. I didn't dive into the details about Dad right away. But when I started mentioning the surveillance, the manipulation being called Sarah, her eyes changed. I was describing the cameras, the hidden room in the basement. And that's when she interrupted me, putting her pen down, tilting her head gently. Emma, do you think you might be experiencing trauma-induced delusions, distorted memories, perhaps even depression-related hallucinations? I frowned. Are you saying I imagined being assaulted while unconscious? She sighed. No, I didn't say that, but Your father is my cousin, and I know him. He's a good man, he's just grieving. I stood up, right then and there. I didn't say another word, and that's when it hit me. They were everywhere. My father's network, or at least those who believed in him, wasn't limited to family. It stretched to therapists, acquaintances, people with real access to my life. I went back to the clinic a few days later to request my records. While waiting, I discreetly snapped a photo of a frame on her desk. Dr. Martinez and my father, smiling at a family gathering, his arm around her shoulders. At the same time, Aunt Patricia's mask began to fall apart. She no longer tried to act like the concerned aunt. She started showing up unannounced. One time I caught her standing in my bedroom holding the backpack where I kept my documents. When I screamed, she just smiled and said, "You need help staying safe, Emma. I just want to make sure you don't do anything stupid." I kicked her out, changed every lock in the house. But then my laptop began running slower than usual. After digging deeper, I found spyware installed exactly 1 week earlier. The same day Patricia had borrowed my laptop to check her email. I felt like I was living inside a glass box. Every move I made, every thought, every piece of evidence I had, it could all be erased in an instant, and I couldn't trust anyone except Mika. She was the only person I still dared to open up to. When I told her everything about the therapist, about Patricia, her face went pale. "Emma, this isn't just disturbing anymore. This is organized. This is manipulation. This is criminal." She offered to call the police. I shook my head. It's not enough. They already think I'm unstable. If I go now, without everything, they'll just say I'm delusional again. I needed time, but I was running out of it, because that afternoon, I received a package, left at my doorstep. No name, no return address. Inside was a maternity dress, the exact style my mother used to wear when she was pregnant with me. Tucked inside was a handwritten tag for the mother of my child. "With all my love, your husband, John." Chapter 8. When the truth became a weapon. I never thought this day would come. The day I no longer had to hide. The day I could walk into a room and every gaze was filled with shock, but not disgust, not pity, not dismissal, just realization. Mika and I walked into the press conference dressed in black suits. Nothing flashy, but every detail spoke of preparation, precision, intent. Reporters crowded in, cameras flashing nonstop. They didn't know who I was not until Mika placed a folder on the table and calmly said, "Today we'd like to release evidence relating to the extortion and abuse of power committed by Mr. and Mrs. Harrison." My adoptive parents' names dropped like a bomb. The entire room fell into stunned silence. I pulled out a recording, pressed play. It was my adoptive mother's voice, crystal clear. "As long as the girl keeps quiet, we can still use her name to collect donations from the funding organizations." I had listened to that tape 100 times, but hearing it there in front of all those people, my hands still trembled. Then came the documents: bank transfers, anonymous wire payments, letters they had written to charities posing as me, and worst of all, emails they'd sent to other children. Sweet, promising, predatory, like they were recruiting the next victim. Mika closed it with one sentence. They didn't just damage a child, they built a system that profited off hurting others. Silence, deafening. I looked down at the table. My heart pounded like a drumbeat in my throat, and one question echoed through my head. Am I doing the right thing? Then I looked up. I saw a reporter with tears in her eyes. Another lowered his camera and placed a hand over his chest. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor, and I was telling my story so that no one else would ever have to live through it again. My adoptive parents were arrested a week later. They tried to deny everything. Of course they did. But the press, the lawyers, the community, they didn't let them get away with it this time. Then something strange and beautiful began to happen. The other kids I used to live with, They started speaking up too. Some sent emails. Some messaged me anonymously. Each story different, but all of them ended with the same line. I thought I was the only one. No, you're not. And that's why I told everything. Chapter 9. I am me. No apologies needed. I remember that morning so clearly, a morning that should have felt like any other. But this time I woke up to sunlight filtering through the curtains, birds chirping somewhere in the distance, and a peace I once thought I'd never feel again. No more knocks on the door at midnight, no more cruel voices through the phone, no more glancing over my shoulder every time I stepped outside. I had moved into a new apartment, small, but mine, chosen by me, not forced on me, not bought by someone to control me. The kitchen became my favorite place. I planted tiny herb pots on the windowsill, learned to cook the meals I was once denied as a child. It sounds simple, maybe even mundane, but for me, it was a quiet revolution. Mika was still by my side. One day she said something I'll never forget. You don't have to be great to be respected. You just have to be you. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. I didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. Not to be richer than them, not to be more successful than them, not even to forgive them. I don't forgive them, I don't hate them either, but I don't forget. Forgiveness is too expensive a gift to give to people who've never asked for it. And I've learned not everyone deserves a second chance just because they were labeled family. I now spend my time doing small things, rewriting my own story, joining support groups for survivors. And whenever someone says, I feel invisible, I sit beside them. I listen, because I've been there. We all deserve to exist, not as tools, not as roles others assign us, but as people. I'm no longer that child in the dark room. I don't flinch when someone mentions my adoptive parents. They hold no power over me anymore. Now I have my real name. I have my real life. And I have a voice not to scream, but to tell, to remind, and to pass on strength. I am me. I don't need anyone's apology. I don't need anyone's approval. I just need to know I survived and I saved myself. Chapter 10. One last time for anyone who's ever felt like me. If you're still listening by now, chances are you felt like I once did. Pushed to the sidelines. Told you were too sensitive. Forced into silence just to keep others comfortable. Maybe you tried to please everyone, hoping anyone would finally see you as worthy of love. And maybe like me, you once believed the problem was you. But if I could go back and whisper something to that girl, the one curled up on her bed, clutching her phone, waiting for an apology that would never come, I would say this. You weren't wrong. You weren't too fragile. You were just the only one brave enough to feel in a house full of people who had shut off their own hearts. I've lived through days where even breathing felt exhausting. I used to believe that if I didn't try harder, I'd never be seen as part of the family. But now I know family is not the place where you must pretend in order to be loved. Real family is where even in your imperfection, you are never threatened, never isolated, never made to run. I chose to rewrite this story. Not to complain, not out of bitterness, but in case someone out there is lying awake tonight, tears soaking quietly into their pillow, you'll know you're not alone. I was once the girl who couldn't speak, but today I've told it all. Not because I've conquered everything, but because with each retelling, the wound inside me heals just a little more. And maybe somewhere someone will hear this and find the courage to step out of their own dark room. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I am me, and I'm still learning how to live like someone who deserves to be loved. Chapter 11. Confrontation. When the truth can no longer be denied. 3 days after the news story went viral, I got the first call from my mother after over a year of silence. She didn't say sorry. She simply said, "Can you come home? The family wants to talk." I had mentally prepared myself for all kinds of situations, but I wasn't expecting a staged intervention. My older brother, older sister, and mother were all there. None of them looked up when I walked in. Then my mother began, "Can we just put all this behind us? Family is what matters most." I laughed. Not out of joy, but the kind of bitter laugh you let out when you realize you've walked into a play and everyone else already knows the script, but you. I replied, "Do you mean the things you said behind my back? Or when you told the neighbors I made everything up for attention?" My sister snapped, "Oh, cut it out. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Just because of some articles you think you're someone important now." I lifted my head. For the first time in my life, I felt no fear. It's not because of the articles. It's because someone finally believed me. And more importantly, I believe me. My brother scoffed, that same look of disdain in his eyes. "You think a few days of online sympathy makes you right? Those people will forget. We're your blood. We're what's real." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just spoke. Calm, steady family isn't a place where you get hurt and then told to stay silent to keep the peace. Family isn't where a child has to learn that speaking the truth means being labeled a traitor. I stood up, pulled a USB drive from my coat pocket, a copy of all the evidence I had gathered over the past few months. "This one's for the lawyer. You can delete every article, try to deny it all you want, but the truth isn't going away." And then I walked out. I didn't look back. No one called after me, no one stopped me, and strangely, I didn't feel sad, just relieved. I've come to understand not everyone gets the family they deserve. But sometimes losing the ones who share your blood, especially the toxic ones, is the very first step to finally finding yourself. If you've made it this far, thank you. Today's story wasn't just about success money or a dramatic comeback. It was about a girl who dared to believe in herself, even when the entire world turned its back on her. It's a reminder that family isn't a place where you're expected to suffer in silence just to keep the peace. A family that truly loves you would never make you question your own worth. If you've ever been hurt by the very people who were supposed to protect you, please remember you're not alone. And you don't need anyone's permission to live as your true, authentic self. Thank you for listening to this story. If it spoke to you, leave a comment below. And don't forget to follow for more real stories, sometimes painful, but always deeply healing.